Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safia here with Anthony Broom and Chris Ballas on Thursday, February 6th. We're going to talk some Michigan football recruiting, Michigan basketball, Michigan football on the field. Derrick Moore had a great interview this week talking about some behind-the-scenes moments from Michigan's win over Ohio State back in November. So we'll get to all that here on the Wolverine.com podcast. Make sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And head to the Wolverine.com. You can use the promo code UM1 right now. That's UM in the numeral 1 for 2 months of premium access for $1 at the Wolverine.com. So 50 cents per month. You can get on our message board, interact with thousands and thousands of Michigan fans over there. Get behind the paywall on all of our articles for just $1 for 2 months. So no reason to not take advantage of that right now. Jumping into it, Michigan finishes the 2025 class. Of course, there could be some moving pieces, but coming out of the late signing day, number 6 in the country, they move up from number 9, landing top 50 offensive tackle Ty Haywood out of Ryan High School in Denton, Texas. Number 48, I believe, player in the country, according to the On3 industry ranking. So a really strong first recruiting class for Sharon Moore and company. I want to get into some of the Pete Nakos from On3 did a great article this week talking to anonymous individuals from collectives, personnel, staffers around the country about how much money some of these guys are making, who the highest paid recruits were in the cycle. Michigan, as a guy mentioned there. But first and foremost, your guys' thoughts just on this class and the way, Michigan was able to finish it off. Because you look at a lot of the top guys that they landed, a lot of them committed in late October, November, and then, signing period in December. And then you end it with Ty Haywood here in February. So it was really a strong finish after what was kind of a slow start.
Well, number one, the boosters stepping up, right? Including Joe Lynn Ellison made a huge difference, and it needed to happen. We can talk about transformational versus transactional as much as we want to. Transactional was always going to be a big piece of this, and there's nothing that says you can't be transformational as well. But if you're not bringing money to the table, you're not going to be in the mix for most of these guys. So that was a huge help, and it was, as I'm writing in a column today, it was really nice to see Michigan keep elite talent in its backyard and add a bunch of top 100 guys. That's the way it's supposed to be at Michigan, and it hasn't been in the last couple of classes. They've lost a lot of guys that they probably should have had. They've made up for it a little bit in the portal, and again, now with this recruiting class. So Sharon Moore is a good recruiter. There's still relationships involved here. All other things being equal, then you still have to be that guy that can close deals. I think Sharon Moore is that guy. Great to see them get a couple elite offensive linemen to go with Bryce Underwood. More than anything, though, it's great to see Bryce Underwood in maize and blue. This is where he should be.
We've talked about it before where I think there's always been this misconception that, the guys that they missed out on just wanted a bag, and Michigan is not going to play that game. And some of these guys are just selfish, and that's not how you build a team. When I think what we've seen is that they've actually probably missed out on a lot of guys that are fits for Michigan that just valued the NIL portion of that a little bit more, which I have no issue with at all. The fact that has been, it seems mostly remedied. Like, you're never going to get everyone that you target, but to end the class the way that they did, especially, you land, 5 stars. I think 2 of your, obviously we know quarterback was a huge position of need, offensive line, a major position of need, especially at tackle. You get 5 stars at each of those positions, and then you finish with a fringe, maybe 5-star guy who might be able to play a little guard, a little tackle. So you look at this class as a whole, again, when you fast forward and see, you're able to see what some of these teams that compete and win national championships do. You send a lot of guys to the NFL, and I think recruiting rankings have gotten to a point over the years where I think it's a pretty good predictor of the caliber of talent that you are bringing into your program now. So to finish the class with 7 composite top 100 guys, which is the same amount that they had in the last 4 recruiting classes combined, these are lotto tickets that have higher odds of paying out than if you're just taking the 3-star guy who has some traits that you need to develop. And that's not to say there's no one in this class that has the ability to be that either. But I do think the amount of top 100 guys that you're able to bring in and stack, over multiple classes, that's what's going to put you in the conversation to not just make the 12-team playoff now, which I think a lot of teams, the window is a lot more open than it's ever been to make the playoff, but you want to be in that Final Four. You want to be a team that competes that last Monday night of the year. And there's no guarantee that all these guys will pan out. I think the math probably says it'll probably only be 3 or 4 of them in that top 100 that pan out. But the more of them you have, the better. And I don't know how you can walk out of this recruiting class anything other than, extremely optimistic about the talent that's being brought in and this coaching staff's ability to sell a vision and bring players in.
And even Sean McGee, Michigan's general manager, on the In the Trenches podcast earlier this week said that 50-50 in terms of guys that pan out and guys that don't is Hall of Fame good in terms of talent evaluation. There are a lot of guys that just kind of, slip through the cracks, or they hang around and you kind of forget about them. Maybe they're on special teams, but you can up those odds, if you do get some of your top targets, as long as you're evaluating them correctly, or at least, as good as you can. Michigan finishes, that number 6 in the country. That is their best class since 2017 on paper. Of course, that class was highly ranked, but didn't work out, ranked number 4th in the country. So it just goes to tell you that it is hard to predict. Although a lot of these, as you said, Anthony, it's the whole stars matter thing. I mean, at the end of the day, it does matter. The blue chip ratio in this class, the percentage of 4 and 5 stars in the class, 67%, one of the highest in the country. Oregon had 95%. That's ridiculous. So they bring in a great class. Ohio State was at 69%, but Michigan 3rd in the Big Ten in that statistic. And when you look back, I look back at this going into the 2023 season when Michigan won the national championship. Their blue chip ratio on a 5-year average was 56.3%. It was the lowest among all CFP era national champions in their 5 years leading into it. But you had Jim Harbaugh. I mean, you did hit on a lot of those guys that maybe didn't they weren't ranked super high. They were ranked pretty high, and then they ended up kind of playing like 5 stars. Then you had a couple 5 stars. But if you're going to do it with a different staff, that Jim Harbaugh is kind of a unicorn, you probably need that ratio to be higher. In it's 1-year sample size, but Michigan is there for this cycle at least. Things are going to change, obviously, in college football next year. Not sure how involved collectives will be able to be. But on that note, obviously money plays a huge part of this. Pete Nako's article titled NIL Collectives and Staffers Share the Top Spenders and Highest Paid 2025 Recruits, where they're anonymously surveyed here. The first question is people can go read it. Obviously, not going to go through the whole thing. Not going to be here all day, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. And who spent the most money on the 2025 class is the first question. SEC Collective says Texas. Big 12 Collective says Oregon, Texas A&M, Ohio State. Nebraska was a school that spent. They said we competed with them with a bunch of guys. Another SEC Collective says Texas, Ohio State, Tennessee. Big 10 Collective says Oregon and Ohio State. They're the biggest spenders regardless. ACC Personnel Staffer says Auburn spends a lot. Texas, Oregon, Texas A&M. So, Michigan started to kind of spend more, it seemed like, towards the end of the cycle. So maybe they weren't on the radar of some of these guys. But, Michigan probably didn't spend the most on their class and still ended up with a really good one. And then when you look at the second question, which was who spent their money the smartest, Georgia kept coming up. Ohio State, Florida, Miami, Notre Dame, South Carolina, but a lot of Georgia because Kirby Smart has that cachet that people said that he can maybe get guys on a discount, probably like how Nick Saban did or even Jim Harbaugh did, which before NIL was $0 at Michigan. So I thought that was kind of interesting that Michigan maybe didn't spend the most. Maybe they spent one of the highest on one guy, Bryce Underwood, but didn't have to spend that much to get this great class.
Yeah, I think you pretty much said it all. And the money's still gonna be there for these. Everybody keeps asking us, well, is this a one-time shot? And no, it's not. And the Champion Circle's done a fantastic job but you have to be responsible and understand that teams are going to overpay for different positions that you need, which is one of the reasons probably Michigan didn't get either of the Notre Dame guys. The other one being that a kid had a girlfriend at another school, and that's tough to compete with. So, but it's not going to be a situation where Michigan is going to try to outspend everybody every year either, which is what some of the, on the message boards say. Oh, Sean McGee's not doing his job, blah 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 blah. He's doing his job by keeping the chemistry together, and setting the market essentially for what they're willing to pay for different positions. And this is going to be a kind of hit and miss, trial and error type of thing too, as they become accustomed to doing this. But to me, they're doing it right. And you don't want to be the old Texas A&M where you had locker room issues because everybody's pissed off about it, what everybody else is getting paid. And you're got to pay for talent though, like Bryce Underwood. You're going to have to overpay or set the market a little bit higher for guys like him. But I think everybody in that locker room understands that. So I like where they're headed now that they've got the money behind it, which was lacking, and the commitment to it, which was also lacking. They got very fortunate, in my opinion, in some ways to get where they are now, and excited to see how it looks going forward.
I think there's a reason you see a lot of these, you could basically call them college football front offices now, taking on more of an NFL type of feel, because I think the bones of your program are going to come via high school recruiting and the additions you're able to make there. And, when it comes to the transfer portal, when it comes to even recruiting, it might be like NFL free agency where the team that spends the most isn't necessarily the team that it does wind up being the squad to beat or what have you. So I think that finding a way to target and spend your money wisely is something that, and we'll see, this is going to play out over a few years now, but I think that Michigan saw it had, particularly, when your head coach comes from an offensive line background, you got to throw money at that position because it wasn't good enough there. You had the number one player in the country 20 minutes down the road, plays quarterback. You had a terrible quarterback situation. And I think that was assets well allocated. When we talk, I feel like immediately after Bryce Underwood, we said, hey, this is all fine and good. And it's good to have that bird in hand, but it's not going to matter if you don't attack the, X amount of things. And I think the offensive line, they did a pretty good job setting a foundation for what's to come. And now, when you talk about spending money smartly or targeting guys at positions of need, obviously the recruiting guys will be more in on this, but when you look at the priority for this next class and this next transfer portal class, I think it's probably got to be at wide receiver, tight end. Now, surround your blue chip quarterback with the weapons that you need to succeed here. So I like the totality of it. When you throw in the transfer portal with what they did on the recruiting trail, it's more of a chemical mixture of how that all fits and augments each other. And I thought they did a pretty darn good job. I don't know if the fruits of that labor will pay off in a big way next season. We'll see what happens in terms of how many games they win, what they compete for when it's all said and done. But I think they've set themselves up nicely for 25 to be solid, and then 26 and 27 maybe be the new window to make a push for this thing.
Mm-hmm. Highest paid player in the class. This is where Michigan gets mentioned. Maybe not highest, who spent the most on their class, their 2025 class in totality, but the highest paid player, one SEC collective says Bryce Underwood and Justice Terry, who's the Texas defensive lineman, flipped from Georgia on signing day. So imagine that was a pretty big bill there that Texas is going to have to pay. ACC collective says David Sanders. He went to Tennessee. He's the number one offensive tackle in the country. SEC collective says Bryce Underwood. SEC personnel staffer says Bryce Underwood. But one SEC collective, this is the craziest thing of all, says that there's another top 100 recruit I keep hearing crazy stories about. 5 acres of land that's under development deeded to him if he stays at the school all 4 years. Crazy stuff. He's going to get a percentage of the revenue from it. There are all sorts Pete's story goes into some of these different things that are going on with the crazy asking prices from some of these guys that their parents need a house. One guy wanted a school to buy their parents a $450,000 house. I don't know. I would imagine a lot of it, and some of the collectives and personnel said that a lot of it is the money. Then they can kind of choose what they do with it, which makes a little more sense to me. But here's the thing, and Chris, you said it's not just one guy. They did pay a lot for one guy, but and by the way, a lot of these, there was a question about high-end quarterback in year one. A lot of them saying 1.5 to 2 million just for the first year. But for Michigan, maybe not the highest paid class, maybe the highest paid guy, but they were also able to compete at some of these positions that their value has skyrocketed over the last year. A couple of the collectives say quarterback, wide receiver have been up there, offensive line and corner have gone up. Another one says quarterback, secondary's gone up. So Michigan's quarterback class, Michigan's offensive line class, Michigan's secondary class were the three best position groups, in my opinion, that Michigan was able to reel in. Those have really high values right now. The wide receivers, you got, 2 or 3 top 100 wide receivers that Michigan landed according to different services. So they've competed at some of these high-value spots. And to add to what you were saying, Anthony, about what they need next year, I'd go all in on D-line. That's another one that costs a lot, but it seems like Michigan's able to compete there. We'll see what the House settlement does to your ability to do that with collectives, but I really like that they were able to do that at those 3 positions that they really needed guys at. Corner and safety over the last previous 2 classes were not up to par under Steve Klinkscale, and they were able to land, 3 or 4 guys rated in the top 100 in the secondary this year. That's huge.
Not his fault, Klinkscale, either. When you don't have the money behind you,
Yep.
he's a great recruiter, no matter what anybody tells you. So now I would imagine if he were here, he'd be doing a great job as well. So
Definitely.
a lot of it is about the cash that you can provide and being on a level playing field. So, but those are the positions. They need an offensive tackle still this year. I'd love to see them. You talk about the spring portal. If they could somehow find a tackle, because right now they don't have a left tackle, in my opinion, that's up to par to compete for a Big Ten championship. At least, boy, it's sketchy. And then still need a punter, still need a wide receiver. Definitely need another wide receiver. So, but again, they don't want to overpay, and I think they've proven that, right? So it's a catch-22, and it's going to be tough going forward too, because for these elite players, Michigan may have an idea of what they want to pay, but the market might dictate a lot higher. So at those positions, especially, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the future.
Well, and part of it too is that when you have, again, you lose all the talent they lost from the national title team, and then you're losing, what was left of that talent by and large the NFL draft. Like it's still a rebuild. Like, let's call it what it is. And you can't fill. I don't think you can fortify all of those positions in the span of 1 off season, 1.5 off seasons, whatever you want to call it. So again, I think they did pretty well. I like where they're at. We've said this before. Jim Harbaugh had an NFL staff, and if you don't believe that, they're all coaching for him with the Chargers right now. Or some of them are in Seattle, and some might be elsewhere. I forget here, but it's got to look different around this staff. And I thought by the end of the year, most of those position groups came along, especially on defense. But you gotta invest. You gotta keep adding talent. You gotta keep stacking smart football moves. And we're still a little over a year into this process here, so it's going to take some time. Good, like Clayton, all that you listed off with the position groups that are valued pretty high. It's great to see they're competitive there. Now you've got to show you can be competitive in some of these other areas, because that they're still lacking. When you look at wide receiver, when you look at what might be left after this year on the interior of the defensive line. So work to do still, but I say on the right track. Momentum is still very much there.
Mm-hmm. And last thing on this, I have a bone to pick with Bryce Underwood. I mean, he's infringing on our territory as content creators with his YouTube channel. He's just launched it the other day, first video out, which was pretty fun to watch, and weighed in on it as a hot dog, a sandwich. Good judgment, not a sandwich, by Bryce Underwood. But he's starting to take, we got some real estate here. Hopefully he doesn't infringe on it. We don't have, the 5 acres or whatever that this recruit's asking for, but we got some.
Yeah, I didn't watch it, but more power
You didn't watch
to him.
BU's YouTube video? Come on.
I did not, but I did hear him say a hot dog is not a sandwich, and to me that makes him, number one in my book. So it's going to piss off a lot of people on the message board. So
But what
we're-
else is new?
yeah, exactly. They're not happy unless they're miserable. Isn't that what John Bacon says about Michigan fans? So, but
That's
it's
right.
not everybody, and it's certainly not everybody on the fort. So, and certainly it's funny because if you have valid concerns at times, you get shouted down by the sunshine pumpers, right? And when you, for example, when you talk about turnovers on the Michigan basketball team and some of the careless stuff they do. So, regardless, wish him all the best, and as long as he doesn't get more views than us, I guess I'm happy. Whatever.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk Michigan basketball then. Michigan holds on and beats Oregon on Wednesday night at Chrysler 80-76. This is a game that we've seen play out multiple times this season. Michigan holds a 14-point lead with 12 minutes to go. Next thing you know, you're down the stretch. You still had the lead. I mean, Michigan led for over 32 minutes in this game, but their grasp on the game, the control of the game just kind of was, not as tight as the game went on. And as the game actually got tighter, Oregon was back in it. That's 10 of 17 games now for Michigan against high major opponents that have been decided by 6 points or fewer. Their last 4 wins have been decided by 4 points or fewer. By the way, 6-4 in the games decided by 6 or fewer this season overall, which, okay, you lose that, one of them, it's 50-50. So you're kind of in coin flip territory when you're in those situations. So I keep saying it, and really for a few years now, because there have been kind of this issue other than last year with the close games. It's more about being in this many of them than it is about, not winning half of them, right? You're not going to win all of them, but they let them back in. I mean, they played really well for 25, 30 minutes in this game, and then the turnover issue, and you start missing shots, and just kind of crept in. 9 turnovers in 9 minutes, 3 travels in 3 minutes by Roddy Gale Jr. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. Trey Donaldson had a stretch there where he was kind of all over the place for a couple minutes. Namari Burnett with some turnovers that are, I don't even want to say uncharacteristic at this point. They're characteristic for all of them right now. It's hard to win that way when you do make it dicey down the stretch, but they did make some plays and do enough at the end of the game. I thought they played really good defense at the end. I thought they rebounded well at the end, and they hit some clutch free throws. Danny Wolf goes 2 for 2. Roddy Gale hits all 4 of his in the last 30 seconds, I believe, of the game. And then Vlad Golden had the big and one. Didn't make the free throw, but that was a huge bucket to put him up 4 with 2 minutes to go. So they did enough, but it's another one of those games where you come out of it just kind of, you're not feeling great, although you keep stacking wins. That's 3 in a row.
Yeah, but they're going to lose those games if they have these types of games against in the last 9 games, they're going to lose them flat out. They were very fortunate to have played Rutgers without Harper, to have played Penn State at home, Northwestern at home, Oregon at home, games that, hey, they had better win, and they found a way, to their credit. Probably should have lost to Penn State, if we're being honest. So it's nice to get the close wins, but these aren't close wins against Purdue. This isn't a close win against Michigan State. This isn't a close win at Nebraska, even, which is playing better basketball. So those are the ones they're going to have to improve flat out if they're going to want to go 5-4 or so, even down the stretch with this schedule. So which would get them, in my opinion, a double bye. So I don't think this is a championship team. I don't think it has the ceiling that we thought it did. There are some guys that are really struggling with their confidence right now. Roddy Gale, Trey Donaldson did not want the ball down the stretch, fellas, yesterday, and that was a concern to me. I was like, well, Trey, go get the ball. Danny Wolf's not the point guard, right? But he deferred to him. And to me, that's a little bit of a red flag, or maybe it's just indicative of one game, but they need him to be more assertive, more confident, because he's the guy that you need to have the ball at the end of the game. So want to see more touches for Vlad Golden, as Dusty May says every game. That needs to happen. It needs to happen on Saturday at Indiana. That's a big one, fellas. That's a great opportunity. They're going to have to play better. Even with Indiana struggling the way they have been, they're going to have to play much better if they want to win in Assembly Hall.
I think the thing that's frustrating for me is that I do think this team has a much higher ceiling than the way it's played, which is why this rut that they've been in the last month or so has been so frustrating. I mean, just about every game that they've played since they played Washington, outside of just getting completely outmanned and outclassed at Purdue, has been a close game. And one of the things that's led to that is, I think, a regression on the turnover front. Like it's just too many. It's been too many all season, but they were sort of creeping up a little bit, and then all of a sudden the bottom is kind of falling out there again. This is, a lot of people have sort of chalked it up as like indicative of Dusty May's style of play. But when you look at, I went and looked this up earlier today. When you look at the last two teams that he had at FAU, they were at 16.9% turnovers, 16.2% the last 2 years. They're at 20.6%. Michigan is this year, which is the worst mark any of his teams have had since his first year at FAU. So I don't know if it's a getting used to the system thing still. Then again, we're in February. I think we're so past getting used to the system and making excuses for that. I just think you have a lot of guys playing boneheaded basketball at the moment. You're not getting what you need out of Roddy Gale. And I know he was dealing with an injury, but just some really confusing stuff from him in this game against Oregon. Trey Donaldson, some nights he looks like Trey Burke, and other nights it doesn't seem like he wants to be that guy or be that lead sort of guard, and kind of defers to Danny Wolf. So you do not apologize for victories at all. And even in the vacuum of one or two games, you can you can make apologies for some of the things that we're seeing, but this is a month now where we've seen them, I'd say, not only play down to their level of competition, but in a case like the Purdue game, like I said, you barely, the engines on the bus were basically still warm, and that game was over. So for me, this is a huge stretch coming up. Obviously, I could see, it's one of those things where, no, I'm not worried that they're going to go 0-9, but they feasibly could lose to any of the teams that they have coming up. And on the flip side, they could beat any of these teams too. So it's frustrating because Moore is there, and this is a pretty veteran team too. I know that they have a lot of new faces, but Reuben Jones has played a lot of basketball. Roddy Gale Jr. has played a lot of basketball. Trey Donaldson has played a lot of basketball. The sum should be adding up to more than it is right now, which is why I push back on maybe they're not as good as we thought they were. No, I think that they can be much better. And these veteran guys need to kind of remove their heads from their rear ends and figure it out, because the margin of error is so finite in this league, let alone with what they have coming up here. So need to see improvement. It shouldn't take, a setback somewhere for you to say, oh, well, now we got to figure this out. It hasn't been good enough for a month or so. And I still have high hopes for this team, but this is becoming less and less of a rut and more what they are. And that is a little concerning to me.
I think the story of their struggles, so to speak, is that there's a lot of good that's undone by, some things that are really detrimental, like turnovers, or like at Rutgers, you're playing incredible defense all game long, but then you don't get the rebound, which is really how you close out a possession. So that's a huge part of defense. I mean, it is defense, but in terms of forcing missed shots and things like that, you were doing a great job. In this game, you were humming. I mean, you were up 14. I thought the offense was operating at an extremely high level, and then it goes into, it got bogged down, as Dusty May said. He, credited some of Oregon's changing up their defense a little bit. He credited or charged some of it on, just Michigan's sloppiness, which it was. It looked like they were a little tired at times when, you had a couple of those cheddar threes that just probably, either, I don't know, they were okay looks, but it just didn't feel like he had the wind at that time to make them. But he did add a huge spark last night. That was massive. He had all 17 of Michigan's bench points. I agree with UCB. Vlad had 15. It was a quiet 15 because he only took 7 shots. Every time he got the ball, he was either dunking it or laying it right in. He was on in terms of his finishing at the rim. And then Danny Wolf, he took over for a stretch of that game. He ends up, I think, 5 of 14 from the field, but some really big buckets. The spin into a step back 3 that he hit was absolutely nasty. He he's played really well against those Pac-12 teams. He could be Pac-12 Player of the Year at this point. Michigan 4-0 against the newcomers in the league so far: USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon. But yeah, the interesting thing about the Trey Donaldson maybe not wanting the ball is when you do play like this, when you're going to allow and really rely on a lot of guys to handle the ball, he's not bringing it up every time, so that you can fall into that where it's like, hey, but at certain points down the stretch in those crucial possessions, especially when maybe you did falter a couple times in a row, there has to be somebody you can go to get that going. But I did think the defense was pretty solid. They rebounded well, had a couple problems with them making tough shots. But this Indiana game on Saturday is kind of interesting because Indiana is somewhat spiraling. You look at Twitter, social media, all over. I mean, Indiana, their fans are not happy with Mike Woodson. They've lost 4 out of their last 5. They've lost 6 of 7. Weirdly, in that 7-game stretch, only 2 home games. So, a lot of these teams are up and down right now in the Big Ten. A lot of it has to do with schedule, but I think this is a mediocre team in Indiana. But mediocre teams at home can beat pretty good teams like I think Michigan is. So KenPom has this one as a 4-point game. KenPom had the Oregon game at an 8-point game. Ends up being close. So this is potentially going to be another tight game for Michigan. They've gotten somewhat comfortable in those types of situations, but you're on the road. Should be a decent environment. Better than a lot of the environments you've seen so far. So that's going to pose a pretty big challenge. But there's a lot in this. There's a lot riding on this game because, as you guys said, I mean, the schedule gets even tougher going forward. You got Purdue coming back here on Tuesday.
Yep, to me it's a 50-50, and you got to get off to a better start than you have in some of these other road games. Obviously, Purdue comes to mind. Rutgers, they had a chance to open that thing up early, and they were terrible. So got to get off to a good start. Get that crowd to turn on Indiana.
Yeah.
One of those games, they were chanting "Fire Mike Woodson" before halftime. So you do that, and it'll be interesting to see how much energy Indiana comes out with after last week when they played hard against Purdue. Probably should have won that game at Purdue, frankly. So they have it in them to play better than they have, but then they just totally didn't show up for the first 10 minutes of the Wisconsin game and got blown out. So it'll be, again, this is one that if you want to stay theoretically in the hunt for a championship, you have to win this basketball game, and I'm not sure they will, but like I said, 50-50. I just want to see them continue to get better and play well. Just like Dusty May said, we're about to go this way. It's time to start.
It might actually be a warm welcome for Dusty May and the Wolverines on Saturday. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but did you know Dusty May used to be an assistant under Bobby Knight?
Wow.
Indiana grad.
I did not know that.
Yeah, also, did you know Matthew Stafford was Clayton Kershaw's catcher in high school? Have you ever heard that?
I've heard that one too.
Really?
Yeah,
in high school? They went to the same high school?
Did you not know that?
I did not. I never heard that. Did they not say that on every broadcast?
Oh, there it is.
He's being sarcastic.
God, I hate it. He is so.
Yes.
Your delivery on everything is so dry and serious. It drives me nuts because I never know when to take you seriously or not. You got to get this one Saturday. Because you have that Purdue game, and again, I think Purdue's humming right now. I know that just like anyone else in this league, you can drop a game at any point. You could win a game at any point, but I don't know that Michigan matches up great with them, which is maybe some of that's colored by the fact that we just saw them lose by 30 a couple weeks ago.
Right. Hot take. Might not be a good matchup.
Yeah. It's time to kind of get this back on the rails. I think there's like I said, too many experienced players, too many self-inflicted wounds. If they were stylistically doing something wrong, it would be one thing, but so much of it is just, I'll say, effort and want to. I just think this team needs to want it a little more. And that's really hurt them in coasting in some of these games where they've gotten up to 8 points, 10 points. You're not going to win every game by 30. I know people watching on TV or people in the game threads would love to just win by 25 and turn the game off and go to bed once the walk-ons come in, but it's not like that. But I don't think it's crazy that when you You get up 10 points. Can you find a way to win by 12, 14? Does it have to be, does the last 2 minutes of every game need to take a half hour to play? No, I don't think so. So it's a big one Saturday. It's going to be, be a lot of, I'll say fun to watch, but could also be maddening because we know what this team has done the last month or so. And we'll see what happens.
No doubt. Well, let's wrap this thing up, guys. I got a quiche in the oven here.
Well, I mean, the thing is too, though, about the, for me, the energy and effort has been there. It's more the mental focus in some of those moments where you don't get, I don't know that they're getting lax like physically. It's like, don't make a dumb pass. You get up 8 points, you feel like, oh, maybe or even like an early shot clock 3. It feels like mentally they have to be better. And I don't know what they can do. I mean, I'm sure they go over it in those film sessions, but yeah, it's going to be tested on the road, especially too, because Indiana could make a run at some point, and that it could be a tough environment. I don't think it's going to be a very welcoming environment for Dusty May, but I think that if Michigan goes in there,
sarcasm, by the way.
Yeah, no, I know, but I think to your point though, if they go in and win this game again, I mean, Dusty May, I think, was trending on Twitter in the first half of the Indiana-Wisconsin game the other night because they do want him. So he's heading home there. It should be interesting in this game. Again, Indiana, they've played okay in some of these, and then they've lost close. So who knows what's going to happen? They're back at home after a kind of a weird stretch. They got a bunch of home games down the stretch. So who knows? Maybe they salvage their season. I doubt it. They're kind of out on Mike Woodson down there. Let's move on to our final topic, which is Derrick Moore taking us behind the scenes in the Michigan-Ohio State game from November 30th. He was on the Blue by 90 podcast earlier this week. And I mean, a lot of good stuff in there, but the main thing that kind of gives you chills listening to him talk about it was the entrance to the game, which has gone completely viral. It comes up, I mean, my algorithm's all Michigan at this point, but pretty much every day you see that on the timeline. And then, how they Ohio State was trying to intimidate them, as we've all seen in some of those videos, as they went back into the tunnel. As you can see on the screen here, if you're watching on YouTube, if Jayshon Barham gives you two-handed point, I mean, you're kind of done for. Your day's over. But they were talking a bunch of trash before. Then, of course, they cry about the flag planting after. But really, a couple things that stand out from the actual game is he's telling about this incredible speech Ernest Hausman gives late in the game, similar to Mikey Sainristil down there in 2022 when Sainristil said, the natty starts now and all this. Of course, they didn't win it all, but they finished that game really high defensively. And then them saying, like, it was just one of those weird moments where the culture, the backbone of their culture was there. No one was pointing fingers. They knew the offense was going to struggle. Kalel Mulling said, hey, we got you guys. We're going to go down there and score. And Derrick Moore said they didn't get it in the end zone or anything like that. But Zavada finished it off. Then they go back out there. They knew that they were going to get to stop. Wink Martindale, when they called that last time out, said, and I quote, "Go out there and make a stop and let us get out of this trash stadium," he said. And then after that, had fun in the middle of the stadium. Derrick Moore was a ringleader of that. But it's, Michigan has a mental edge. You look across the sideline and the feeling and the confidence from those Michigan guys, which really did start with that entrance to the game, was apparent all afternoon long. And it was kind of cool to hear about it.
Yeah, and looking at Jack Sawyer chirping before the game and then crying after the game was beautiful. So it was fantastic just to see him giving it out and then not being able to take it. That's Ohio State in a nutshell in that trash stadium. That's all I've got to say about it.
Wink saying that is just hilarious.
Fantastic. I want Wink back.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you have a fourth straight win over Ohio State in your pocket, and Ryan Day has agreed to an extension. He'll be there for the next 7 years at least, though. We'll see if he's got a natty in hand now, which, give credit. It was won and well-earned, but I feel like a couple more losses to Michigan, they might run this guy out of town because that will wear off eventually. They're going to go for 5 in a row this last Saturday in November this year. But it's it just reinforces the fact that when you look at the totality of the last 4 years compared to what Ohio State did in 4 weeks, I think what Michigan did trumps all that. So just my opinion, if we want to compare, a natty is a natty. You get to live with that forever, but you want to compare what the last few years have been like. It's still, I give Michigan the upper hand, even with, an 8-5 season. But been a fun ride, and we'll see if it continues.
As our Doug Karsh said, it is the first national champion with a Duke's Mayo Bowl resume. Fantastic, Doug.
I mean, he's got a point. I don't know that it would be the Mayo Bowl specifically, but it's the resume, guess what, of a team that goes to a game and then all their players opt out of the bowl game. But instead they made the 12-team field and they won all their games. You got to give him credit for that, but he's completely right. College football has changed. You're going to see this now. We're a fourth-place team in the Big Ten. We just did. Wins it all, quote unquote.
What game they didn't win? The one that they wanted most.
That's right.
And the story.
Maybe the second one that they wanted the most, potentially at Oregon, they lose. But postseason they got some wins. I do love this from Derrick Moore, who says about the Ohio State, all they were doing before the game. He said they kind of sat right there staring at us, talking trash. It was like, who do y'all think y'all are? We're not scared of y'all, anything like that. When we got back in the locker room, you could just feel the energy. And they looked running out there like that was the case, and of course backed it up all afternoon long. That was incredible. So we will see how this rivalry turns. But Derrick Moore's the guy who's coming back and never lost to them, and no one on their roster has beaten Michigan. So at least as a Buckeye, so that's got to make you feel good going into 2025.
Yep, I want to see Jack get that 0-4 tattoo right there on that big swollen bicep.
You think he will?
I don't know. I'll pay for it if he wants to. Give me a call.
That's right. I love it. Well, that is going to be our show for today. Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening. Remember to like the video if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and head to thewolverine.com. You can use the promo code UM1 right now for 2 months of premium access for just $1, and we will see everyone next time.